Alright guys, it's Ben. Today I want to show you some cool ways to use a splash cymbal in your playing. So why would you use a splash cymbal? Well, they're a softer, more dynamic sound than like a big crash. So there's lots of ways you can use them in your playing to help kind of carve more dynamics and give a bit more depth to the parts that you're writing. And I've been very lucky to get my hands on the brand new, just released at the NAMM show, Sabian AAX 8-inch Aero Splash. So you can see it here, it just looks beautiful. It's got a lot more sort of holes than the previous Aero Splash design does. It makes it really trashy, but very dynamic. Like, I've just been playing loads off camera and just loving this cymbal. So it's a good chance to show you guys how I would approach adding a splash cymbal into my playing. So let's get into my top 3 tips of ways you can use a splash cymbal. So the first way that I'd use a splash cymbal is either coming into a softer section, like a verse out of a chorus, or in the middle of that section. So imagine you've got your big heavy chorus, and I'm going to use the splash on the one coming into the verse if I don't want the big decay of a crash, riding over the verse. Say you want it to come in quite tight. And I'll also play through and use that splash as an accent cymbal in that tighter groove in the verse. So something like this. So you can see there I was coming out of the big heavy chorus. I want it to go straight into the verse. I didn't want a big crash on the one of that verse, so I hit the splash on the one, and then it was a bit of a tighter groove, so a bit more dynamic, and so I used the splash then just a couple of times to accent that, because if I'd hit the big crash, it would really stand out. It might get in the way of the vocal. So that's one way that I'd use a splash. So another way you can try and use a splash is just before or just after the main snare in your groove, in the backbeat. Just a really great way of adding some texture and some depth to the groove. So I'll play a groove, and I'm not going to hit anything else on the splash before the snare. I'm just going to let it just sing. I'm not going to put a kick drum with it, and you'll hear it just before the snare. And then I'll move to playing it just after the snare. It has 2 different effects, but both times you want to let the splash ring just before or just after the snare. Sometimes you can put a kick with it as well. So I'll give you an example of that afterwards too. So a third way that you can use a splash is actually in the middle of a fill. And I like to use it in a linear way. And what that means is that I'm not playing anything at the same time as the splash. It's always like an independent note on its own. So I'll just play like a groove, and then I'll mess around with a couple of linear fills. And instead of where I'd hit a tom, I'll just move my hand over and hit a splash. And it's because it's a totally different sound, it changes the whole feel of the fill. So just take one of your fills that you're doing, make it linear if you can, if you want to get this exact sort of sound. It doesn't have to be, but just take something you'd hit and hit the splash instead, and you'll end up with a totally cool different fill. So it sounds like this. So there you go, 3 great ways to start using a splash cymbal in your playing. I hope that was helpful. Also, if you're looking to actually mount the splash cymbal on your kit, you don't always need another cymbal arm. I've got a video on my channel about how to actually mount that on top of a crash. So if you haven't seen that, go check it out. If you enjoyed this video, let me know in the comments down below, or other stuff you want to see. Give it a thumbs up, and if you want to share it with your drumming and musical friends, that would be wicked. So see you in the next video.